could anybody in their right mind invite somebody to the North Pole in February? That's a question I want to ask.
It was a test, Jim.
We love to torture people.
Hey, listen to this. I caught the plane I had to catch was in Fargo, North Dakota.
Okay, yeah.
That's a flight I took up to your place, you know. So and I'm a Fargo fan, you know, following the series on Netflix or whatever it is.
Oh, yeah.
Every time I see that, I think, oh, that damn airport I went to, and I went to the North Pole from there.
Welcome to the Define the Relationship podcast, the Seeds Church podcast. We continue in our new series, 25 Years, the Seed Story, a Memoir. And today we really have a treat. We have tracked down the church planting coach that we worked with over 26 years ago, who was a part of being very instrumental in the conception of Seeds Church, giving us as a 15-person launch team. Jim Griffith is a church planting coach and church leadership coach and is the founding partner of Griffith Coaching. I think you'll really enjoy this throwback conversation where we try to remember what happened in those early days when Jim spent 2 days with us right in the depths of February, which is our coldest part of the year. Hope you enjoy it. So yeah, we're at here at Seeds Church, we're at a bit of a fulcrum point because we've been in leadership since you came on the stage with us and helped us out. That's 26 plus years ago. And and we've discerned that we want to move on to other things, and so part of what we wanted to do in this transition period was actually get a bit of an oral history down. We're not great with like writing written kind of things in our community, and we might blame you for that. We'll get to that later because you said don't write too much down, and we seem to have taken that to heart. But
well, Griffithism number 101. When in doubt, blame the coach.
Right.
So I get blamed for a lot of things these days.
That sounds good. So anyway, we wanted to put together a bit of a podcast of our history and some of the phases of our community over 25 years. And it's kind of impossible for us to talk about the beginning stages of what we went through as a community without the input that you had. We were fortunate enough to get in contact with you, and you were willing to head up to the Great White North. And in February, which is, it's courageous for somebody who's from Florida. And yeah. And we look back, we tell many stories over the years fondly of the significant time we spent with you. It was 48 hours that really shifted how we did things. So we thought we'd just kind of, I don't know, you probably have a great memory, but you've dealt with like hundreds and hundreds of congregations and leaders and coaching and all that kind of stuff. So we thought we would just kind of take you back there a little bit from what we recall and also some of the notes that we were looking at and just trying to see what you remember, but also maybe even if you don't remember, kind of speaking into some of the things that were significant for us and how maybe you might explain what you were trying to do with us, or what you were hoping to have happen in the situation, or
what your observations like internal that you never let us in on.
I don't remember any of those. I don't remember where I was yesterday, so it's going to be it'll be interesting to have some discussion. But I do have some. All I have is fond memories, so that's always a good thing. When you look back.
And we won't move you off those. I think we'll stick there. So, I'm trying to think back, like when we got connected to you, I think maybe the connection point was our connections with Bill Easom and Tom Bandy. I think they had a bit of a relationship. Right. And so somehow your name came up, and we, when our group of 15 that we started with, when we started thinking about doing this, like we told them as leaders, said, like, if you want us to give leadership to this, like you're going to need to help us get some training. We're going to need, like, this is something that we've never done before. And,
right.
And so they thought, okay, that's a great idea, but like, why just send you off somewhere to some boot camp to get something why don't we bring somebody here and then we all can get the boot camp kind of experience? So that was what our people were thinking, and it was a really good idea, I think. And
boy, did you bring that boot camp.
yeah. So how would you explain? I think back then the big thing that we learned about you is that you had some connection to the early days of Willow Creek. And at that point in our church leadership as young people, I mean, that seemed like a significant thing.
Sure.
Can you say just a little bit about your background over the last how many years? You don't have to say how many years you've been doing stuff, but for decades you've been in a role helping churches plant churches and helping leaders be good leaders.
Sure. Well, in the early 70s, I went off to seminary in right outside of Chicago, Illinois. And while I was in seminary, got involved with a very traditional but non-denominational church there in Park Ridge, which is a northwest suburb right by the airport. Mm-hmm. And at that point, they were just beginning to start a high school group that they called Sun City. And so I kind of got involved with that, and that's where Bill Hybels and Dave Hombo, who were the founding kind of pastor and music pastor of Willow Creek, that's where they got their start. Mm-hmm. So it was out of that student ministry that just exploded there in Park Ridge that they then moved to a movie theater farther northwest of Park Ridge and started it was Willow Creek Movie Theater, and that's where the name came from.
Right.
I'm probably the only person who would get bored in a setting like that. I stayed in Park Ridge and directed the others. So we had two student ministries at that point, and then moved back to Florida to start new churches. My role was I lived in Gainesville, Florida, where I went to school, and the church that kind of sponsored me there. And my role was to go to a community, knock on doors, gather people together, and start a church. So I did that 3 different times. Then I went back to seminary for another degree, and then moved to North Carolina, right outside of Charlotte, a suburb, and started a church there. We hived off a couple congregations out of that in farther east communities, and then moved to Denver in 1990 to start a church there. And 3 years into that, was at a point in time where I realized, boy, I had no idea what was going to happen, but I was done with planting churches. And I started getting in in 94, I decided we had started these boot camps in the early 90s that I was just doing once or twice a year with some other leaders and church planters, and they invited me to do some teaching. I loved the teaching and the training, and then I started getting calls about what do we do about coaching, and so I just kind of fell into that. So in 95, I started assessing, training, and coaching church planters just kind of on my own. Because I wasn't attached to a denomination, I was pretty much just kind of a freewheeler, and so I just started doing that. And then in 99, the United Methodist Church called me and said, could you come and train our church planters? And that took off. And then I started working with other denominations and other groups. And it was really the Christian Missionary Alliance and the Wesleyan Church in Canada that I got primarily connected to the Canadian movement that was going on. So anyway, so it just kind of, it's kind of more from there and took off to the point where it's just, it's been a great ride. It's not the kind of thing you sit down and plan out, okay, this is what I'm going to do with my life. But it's been a neat ride every chapter of the way.
Well, thanks for sharing that. I remember we've identified kind of 3 big things that kind of came out of our time with you that I think had real significant impact on us throughout our life as a congregation. And the whole Willow Creek connected piece, I think, was important because Darlene and I, in our leadership, I mean, we were being very influenced by church leadership material that was specifically coming out of the U.S. context, stuff that we were getting into through Bill Easom and Tom Bandy. And I remember we handed you, I'd say, a voluminous amount of paper talking about our aspirational goals, values, mission, and stuff. And I think we were like hoping and looking for some real validation about what we had put together and how you were going to help us, go that direction. And the first thing we noticed, and we looked in our minutes, and it's kind of interesting because these days the word deconstruction has become a bit of a a term that's used a lot. But this was written in our minutes after one evening with you, and it feels as if we've deconstructed. When do we reconstruct? And so I would like you maybe to talk a little bit about that, because it felt like, Jim, you came in and you were all about giving us a bit of a reality check. Mm-hmm. In fact, I don't know if you said this, but I thought you said something about, there's lots of people, they read a book about Rick Warren, The Purpose-Driven Life, or they read about Bill Hybels and Willow Creek, and, they end up Willow Creek without a Hybels. Did you say that?
I'm sure I did. I know I've said it many times. Some version of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So tell us about what you did with us on that.
Well, I think it's always it's more of a caffeine fix. Church planters, they drink a lot of decaf when they're looking at their church plant. You guys lived with that for years and years and years before you even came to the decision that, hey, we're going to do this, right? Mm-hmm. So, the tendency is to sit around and, just, drink from the same, everybody's drinking from the same tap and, breathing the same air. So it's more I began to kind of call it, they're inebriated, which it's a good kind of inebriation. It's not a bad inebriation, but it does affect reality. Mm-hmm. So the vision that you had, you drank from the vision glass so long, it just kind of, mm-hmm. you get dazzled. And so basically it was clear to me that the other thing I would say that there's no relationship between your vision, values, and mission statement and adding one new person to your church. There's everything related to you walking out into your mission field and talking with people and adding people to your church. I've never had anybody say, well, what's the vision of this church? And then they surrendered their life to Christ. Not one time have I ever seen that happen. Same thing. Well, what are the values of the church? Oh, well, I'm going to become a Christian now. Mm-hmm. No, it's church planting is a contact sport. And so what I tried to do with you and pretty much everybody I ever worked with was get them off of obsessing about what I called the two-dimensional part of church planting. Mm-hmm. That's, all stuff on paper, but it still didn't have people in it, And so the thing that I remember most was, first of all, you had enthusiasm for your area and you had a group of people. I don't know if any are still there, but they were good people. And so I just try to get you back on thinking, okay, let's just get more of these people. Go reach these people that are just like you, So I think that was probably what, if you had to quote me back then, that's probably the dynamic of what happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I know we often joked about how we felt pushed by you because we were talking about things maybe like up here. And you were asking well, but what do you do? What do you already do? What is not just what are your aspirations and what are your visions, but really helping us. I think the word deconstruct it was hilarious to come across it because we talk about deconstruction and we're in a very unique season now in terms of our community. But yeah, I feel like you did a good job of giving us tools, but you also really listened well. I think you were really listening to what things were coming naturally out of our community. Mm-hmm. And
right. Yeah.
And those things didn't just go away when you left. In fact, that was another just beautiful thing kind of going back. So we've been going back through all 25 years of stuff, right? And right. To come across these notes from that weekend and to see how much of that I mean, some of it is like, whoa, that was definitely 27 years ago. We don't talk like that anymore. But then other parts of it was that's the same. That stayed through and through, and you helped us. You helped us with that. Yeah. So I mean, I have a great deal of gratitude to you for coming in and helping us start what we didn't know. I mean, at the time we were like, we don't know if we're going to survive more than a couple of years. And I think we often actually even talked about, well, can you imagine when we're 20, if we get to 25, and that's what we're at. We're at 25. Yeah. So, yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, we sometimes, when you live through 25 years of history, you tend to think about how much has changed over that time. You think, oh, we think differently, or we talk differently, or we learned that. We learned that 10 years ago or whatever. But it's sometimes interesting to go back to the beginning and see where there's a wise coach who's asking questions that have been significant questions throughout. And even the language is actually, the vocabulary is similar. And so I think it is a sign of, like, not to flatter you, but it's a sign of kind of a good work you did with us, that it landed with us. It stayed there, and it actually was able to grow from that just 2 days that we spent together.
Can I talk about this piece, or you want to talk about that first?
No, you can talk about that piece. This is good. I go for it.
I'd like to jump in just on a little different. The group of people, when I look at church planting, I would always say, okay, well, here's the planter and their spouse, right? And the benefit of me coming there was I got to see who you were attracting. And who was or either attracting or was attracted by you to whatever you were talking about doing. And I don't remember any of the people, but I just remembered that there was rather than an arrogance about, we're going to be the church, there was almost an innocence about, we want to try to figure out how to do this together. And community was a big part of what you were doing, which I understand why you had Seeds of Life Community Church. But there was, which is oftentimes because people take their tagline and they try to make it the name of the church. But it was, the seeds were being sown for a community. There's no question about it. And so those 15 people are cherished in terms of your history. Again, you have short-termers and medium-termers and long-termers of people involved in a church plant, as you've discovered.
Yeah, for sure.
That initial group, the thing that struck me was you guys were just like normal people, and that there's a lot of normal people out there that get ignored or get overlooked, just do things normally that you normally do. I think that was my big, because I think more back about the discussion. Yeah. It was, you had these really fantastic things, but I'm like, but normal people don't do that, and they're not impressed by it. Just be who you are. So anyway, just to put a little addendum on our previous conversation.
Yeah, I was just going to pick up on the whole normal people thing, because I don't know where it happened in the weekend, but at some point there was a note saying, let's talk about the name, and you just said, sounds fringe charismatic.
I do. I've used that term 100 million times, believe me.
Oh, we thought we were special.
Yeah, you were special. It's just, you're always special. And the issue is sometimes, are you hitting the target? That's really,
It's kind of funny because at some point, I don't know when it was, but maybe about a decade in, I think we very intentionally have dropped the of life.
Community
and we've talked about Seeds Church. It's Seeds
just
Church,
called Seeds
and
now.
It sounds more agricultural than charismatic.
Yeah, well, I tell people now that the name it rarely helps you. It can hurt you, but it rarely helps you. But the other thing is that in this day and age, this is true in Canada as well as here. Is if I don't know you, I don't trust you. And if I don't trust you, I don't really care what the name of your church is. I'm not coming.
Mm-hmm.
So it's still relationally driven. Did I mention it's still a contact sport? I mean, it's all about trust. So that's really going to be the piece going forward. It's all about relationships that you build.
Yeah.
Throughout our time together, us asking you questions, you asking us questions, us talking about, and I really do think that we did see ourselves as just normal people. I don't think we felt certainly not a cockiness but not even a strong confidence. None of us had set out to be church planters.
Right.
And this was something I think most of us stumbled into, including Ted and myself. But we were along for the ride, and what a ride it's been. But somewhere along the line of that weekend, you threw out as maybe a throwaway line. I don't know what it was, but you said, well, it sounds like you guys just want to make Jesus real. And that really resonated with us. It stuck, and that became the mission of Seeds, and has remained the mission for 25 years to make Jesus real. And is something a 5-year-old can say,
right,
and an 85-year-old can say, and is something that we will forever wrestle with what that means, and engage the many layers of exploration about that. Like, for sometimes it's like, well, what's the word make? How do you make Jesus real? Like, that sounds, what do we do about that? What is, take every word, and there's we can explore that for the rest of our life, what that means to make Jesus real. But it was the line in the context of that conversation that really lit something in our group, and I think has continued to light a fire in our community around. That's something we can rally around, and it's broad enough, it's specific enough, and it gives us a lot of room to play. So the rest of our, when we articulate who we are as a community, we talk about it like a playground, and making Jesus real is kind of like at the center of that playground. And there's lots of ways to play. There's lots of places to play. And that's just been a beautiful place for us to center on.
Yeah, it was a bit more like eulogizing there, Jim, because I mean, in some ways, like I don't think you necessarily knew what you were doing, but you were sort of listening to us and saying, "Hey, it just kind of sounds like this is what you're wanting to do. You want to make Jesus real." And it was like, I don't know, lights went off. I mean, I don't know if we heard angels singing or not, but it clearly it stuck.
We're not that fringe charismatic.
We're not that fringe charismatic, true. It stuck. I don't know. Do you remember that at all? Or do you have anything to kind of riff off of that?
Yeah. What do you feel when you hear that, or what? Yeah.
Well, it's very meaningful to me because it's kind of been my life's work to kind of just meet with people and reflect back what I hear, obviously under the kind of the canopy that Jesus is sitting in the room listening to our conversation. And it was a kind of a sum and substance of what I was seeing and hearing. I don't remember making the statement at all. Most of my clients over the years that have reminisced with me have mentioned some statement that I made, and I have no recollection whatsoever, which tells me, okay, well, this is probably a God thing, because, usually this great statements I make that I agree with, God had no part of it, So, but and because it's a summary, it really summarized what I felt your group was doing. You didn't have some giant mandate, you didn't have some it wasn't a James Brown experience from Blues Brothers, where you get this, clear thing. It was a, in some respects, it was an unsettling emotion as you guys were kind of working through your call and where God was leading you with this group of people. There was no sense of certainty on anyone's part, other than your wonderful mission statement and values and vision that you spent all that time. Other than that, but you didn't have any certainty. Okay, what are we going to do? So I think that's the piece that kind of all that produced that statement.
Yeah. I think that one of the big parts that we maybe did the most work that we did together was around like how to move our senses of what we hope to do, put it into some kind of practical strategy that wouldn't burn us out and would get us to a place where we could actually sustain something, hopefully for a longer period of time. And I don't know if I'm remembering this correctly, but I think that you did a rocket ship kind of drawing or something, trying to think through what a launch of Seeds Church would look like. And I think we were probably already talking about, okay, hey, when can we start Sunday mornings? We were excited about Sunday mornings, and I'm sure that's not unusual for church planters to like, can we start doing services? Talk a bit about like how you temper that feeling like, well, we got to be a real church as soon as possible. And the quicker we can do that means that we're a real church. And you sort of said, well, let's take it a little slower, think from the end backwards. Maybe you want to talk a bit about that. I mean, you definitely gave us a strategy that we started working after you left, and we didn't have that before. Do you want to talk a bit about that, or in broad strokes?
People want to get to the launch phase very quickly, the grand opening. When can we do the grand opening? And and at that time, you had me come in at the appropriate time, which is the conception phase. Many church plants, I get called after they've already taken off, and 6 months are into it, and reality is set in, and now they're already starting to do a nosedive, and then they go, well, what do you think? And by then it's almost too late. So in the conception phase, if you have colleagues or friends that are looking at planting churches or any kind of project, it's the conception phase that needs to be thought through. And in your case, whatever, I can't remember much about kind of your time frame, but I do know that you were all hot to trot about, oh, we got to get started. Let's start meeting. And the number one mistake, humanly speaking, the number one mistake that church plants make is they launch too soon. It's a premature launch, or I started to think more of it about pregnancy, and it's a premature birth. And so, when you have I have a grandson that was born prematurely and a nephew that was born prematurely, and our whole focus during the time that they were now out of the womb and in, an intensive, infant critical care unit, was, did they survive the day? It's survival. It's not, hey, how are they going? Did they survive? And so when you launch too soon, the whole focus moves from launching to surviving instead of, okay, now we're growing, we're making progress. So
and
launching
I think
too soon, that's part of it.
Yeah, and I think you, along that analogy, helped us understand that we were an unplanned pregnancy. That was language that we used, and that those analogies are helpful too about conception. And don't go too slow down. You're not ready for birth.
And you're not going to get there launching any quicker. In fact, you'll actually do yourself in. I mean, unfortunately, I've done over 100 autopsies of failed church plants, and number one reason even today that they fail is that they launch too soon. They don't take enough stock with conception. They think, oh, we got to launch, because now they're reading about some church in the 1990s that started and succeeded on that. 100 years ago. They're still going off of these kind of Willowbackburg, ResHillVillageship.com churches that, were fantastic churches, but they're 30, 40, 50, in some cases 50 years old. and using that methodology is just, it's really unfortunate.
I'm wondering, like, over the 26 years since you were with us, like, what are you noticing about churches, church planting? What's kind of captures your attention in 2024?
Do you have hope for the church, Jim?
Yeah. I mean, that's a big question, but I'm just curious, like, there's a lot of water under the bridge since 1999.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I don't have a whole lot of hope for the institutional church, Darlene, to answer your question briefly. COVID accelerated the downward trend, and
Yeah.
and that has not abated. It's just going to get worse. And then certain distractions, major distractions, at least in our country, that have happened are contributing even more so to the distraction away from the Great Commission. In other words, what the purpose of the church is to do is to go and make disciples. So I think the smaller communities that are, beginning to get some traction and not stay small, but just stay vital. Size is not as relevant to people who don't have faith. Oh wow, you got this and you got this, and they're not, the dog and pony shows are not as maybe a draw as they were previous generations. So my hope is more for really the kind of history that your church has. It made Jesus real, and you kind of worked within that confines and kept forward at that. I mean, I just was at a community out in Oklahoma that is doing a great job. They might have 60, 70 adults in worship, but the purpose of their church is to reach. They've identified an unsafe safe space in the church, and that is for caregivers, parents and caregivers of special needs children and adults. They don't know what to do with them. If they show up to a regular church, people don't know what to do with somebody who's, just being normal or special in terms of how they do it. So they're doing it really great. They rent a storefront and are really meeting needs that Jesus would say, this is important.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think there's a renewed sense of what does Jesus consider important versus what does the institutional church need and to survive, because now it's in these churches, even the non-denominational 50-year-old churches they've institutionalized. So now their goal is survival in the midst of this as well. So I think so we're becoming less Christian in terms of affiliation on your census form, much less Christian. And the other thing would be even the Christians that are in the United States, it's the Christians that, in my experience, are, and I don't have a lot of research other than anecdotally, but they're the ones that are becoming more unchurched, is the disciple-oriented Christians.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the things you're saying seem to track with the way our cultures have been, how things have shifted in 25 years. One of the things that we've said is that when if you remember, you probably don't remember, but our early 15, I mean, most of us were Gen Xers in that group, except for Wes and Ella, who are they were builder people that gave us a whole lot of credibility, And the rest of us were just like, we were like 20 somethings doing this. And when we reflect back, we were thinking like, we really believed in church. Like we really believed in church. We just wanted church to look, it needed to look different. It needed to be responsive in a different way than it had been. But now people that are kind of where we were when we did it, people are a lot more agnostic about church, like at all, even people who have history with it. And so it really changes the questions you ask. And what does it mean to be a community in that kind of environment? What do you focus on, and what's most important? And will churches survive, or will there, faith will survive. We know that. That's not going to be dependent on us. But certainly the field has changed a lot.
Yeah. What a faith community looks like and acts like is going to be very different, and it is, increasingly so. COVID removed any real masks that churches were doing by just going through the motions. Even church people realize, wait a minute, there's other things on Sunday morning, and is this benefit? Is there any personal benefit I'm having apart from going? And that was pretty much it. So it's interesting times.
What's the piece about, I really think it was interesting that we either naturally or because you were part of encouraging us, to slow down and to think, to work backwards on our timeline, which was really helpful strategically, but also we have maintained a pretty adaptable structure. So I think that you encouraged us to be slow to structure. And one of the gifts, I think, of Seeds over the years has been an adaptability to what is organically kind of emerging, and be able to evolve and emerge and respond without having a lot of too much structure or bureaucracy or the institutional obstacles that get in the way of us actually being Jesus to one another, or allowing some of that spontaneity. I think that's been probably one of our greatest gifts, is that, and it certainly has come with its shadow too, in that we haven't necessarily always been great at policy or writing things down or understanding, how do things work here? Well, we've had lots of phases of Seeds, and in some ways I feel really proud of that we've been able to that was 5 seeds ago that we were like that. That's the community's changed, and we change, and and can we be a place where we can change? And I would say over the years, probably a little bit pre-COVID, that allowed people with really big questions about, I don't know if the church matters anymore, or I don't know if I want my kids to have that same theology that I had, because that was actually pretty hurtful to me. And I don't want my kids, when we were starting the church, there was such a strong basis of parents who would bring their kids because they didn't really believe in God, but they still wanted to give their kids the church experience. And now we find a lot of people are I don't want my kids to have the theology of this, because that screwed me over. And
destructive.
And so I think to some extent it became a good place to process. Instead of leaving the church to process whether we believe in the church, we started to have the conversations in the church. There's no question that isn't allowed to be processed here. And
do you have a question for Jim?
Well, I just feel like I wondered if that was intentional, or I have thought, did you work with other communities in that way, or is that something that, yeah,
Yes.
specifically around structure and your, was that part of what you did with churches in general, like try to slow them down in terms of being too ordered?
Yeah. Always. No, I think you've hit on something that in retrospect I hadn't really thought of, that there was a piece of that in my consultation or my coaching, but yes, that's very much the case, is that you have outside pressures. A church plant, when it's chaotic. Everybody's kind of doing stuff. You're basically operating out of the back of the pickup, and trying to figure out, okay, this and this and that. At some point in time, and we see this in the book of Acts, you have to you have to organize, but you don't have to be an organization. And what happens is, many church plants, if they have any outside agencies, the goal of the agency is to get you to be part of their organization.
Yeah.
And this is the way we're going to do things. To be an organization, this is how you have to operate. And these are they give you a boilerplate, and then you have to figure out, can we fit into that? And that's very, very hard, if you're really trying to be a genuine church planter or entrepreneurial at all. And that's usually where the conflict goes, is trying to fit the boilerplate. And I remember we talked about grace, that was a big part of what you guys wanted to do, grace, because you come out of these, uh, unhealthy kind of situations. And I probably didn't say this to you, but to me, grace is not a doctrine, it's a behavior. And I mean, there are churches today that are splitting over the doctrine of grace. I mean, you hear all these, a lot of these denominations, everything's about, grace, it's grace. Well, it's, the Calvinists even call it unconditional, It's unconditional, but then there's a whole list of conditions that you got to meet to stay in, to stay under grace. And I'm like, wait, no, this is not. So I think probably what you're talking about is creating becoming organized, Darlene, to the point where grace doesn't become a doctrine, it remains a behavior. And then the idea that, okay, I mean, I remember 5 years into doing my boot camp, some lady came up and said, I was here 4 years ago, and now you've changed some ideas. I go, well, things change. I mean, and that's really, if you don't maintain a value of, are we morphing in a good way? It's always about staying healthy. And, there's certain things that you can do when you're 20 that you shouldn't be doing when you're 40. And certainly now, I'm in my 70s. You just can't do those things. Your bones will break. Your body will fall apart. Things change, and so you adapt to that. So I agree. I think there has to be a value within the you're organized, but at the same time you're organized to understand. Okay, this is this chapter, and now we're going to get organized to the next chapter, and then the next chapter. You organize into that, but you don't necessarily remain the same way.
Totally.
Oh, thanks for that.
Do you have something you'd like to say or add, or you intended to say that we are not getting at with a question before we bring
How
things
could anybody in their right mind invite somebody to the North Pole in February? That's a question I want to ask.
It was a test, Jim.
We love to torture people.
Hey, listen to this. I caught the plane I had to catch was in Fargo, North Dakota.
Okay, yep.
That's a flight I took up to your place, So and I'm a Fargo fan, following the series on Netflix or whatever it is.
Oh yeah.
Every time I see that, I think, oh, that damn airport I went to, and I went to the North Pole from there.
That's so true.
I had to get that in. I mean,
Yeah.
you don't have to put that in. You don't want that in the interview, because you want people to still think you're very kind and compassionate and empathetic toward the people you're asking to come. No, again, I think it was for me, the piece that really was that you guys, and you've continued obviously to maintain in a spirit of lifelong learning. You know, what I saw was the seeds of lifelong learners 25 years ago, 26 years ago. You were learning. There was a desperation and hurt that you had experienced, some disillusionment, and it's tough when you're in your mid-20s and you become disillusioned. And so the fact that you and others, fought through that. I mean, that was a seed that was sown that you did not let it take root, which creates bitterness, which I've seen so many times in people, Christ followers or not. It takes early and it does not get taken care of. So kudos for that. I mean, that's something that you want to say. This was something that we did in our journey, is that these seeds were sown, and we just said we're not going to let those seeds. Those are not the seeds we're going to let develop in our hearts. So I think there was that, the lifelong learning, and moving forward with that group of people that just were normal. So it was great. And
well, thanks for saying that, Jim.
I get inspired to just hear what you've done and how the community has developed over these times. I look forward to hearing what you're going to do in this next chapter, whatever that holds.
Yeah, we appreciate that. Because we're recording this today on a Tuesday. We were supposed to record it last Thursday, which happened to be Hurricane Milton Day coming through Florida. So that wasn't a very smart scheduling. But we celebrated Canadian Thanksgiving yesterday. That's we do it a bit earlier than you Americans who do it closer to Christmas. But I think we can honestly say one of the things that we're very grateful for is your impact on us and on our community. Having a good coach is really invaluable. It's priceless, and
yes,
and we're so thankful that you were dumb enough to fly up to Manitoba in February to help us get things started, and it's made a big difference for us in our community. So I know people are going to be excited to hear your voice, and people remember you fondly. We often talk about it. So thank you so much, Jim, for being with us.
Well, it's been my honor and pleasure. Thanks so much for having me. I don't get to celebrate enough of kind of seeing the fruit of the labors that God has sent into the harvest. So wish you guys all the best, and God bless to the church and to the people that are there. So thanks again for having me.
Yeah, you too.
Thank you.
Take care.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye.